Today we're talking about creating your own science communication, and we spent 8 weeks talking about the different aspects of science communication, like, for example, social aspects of science and political aspects of communication that scientists can use. And we talked about the COVID Select Subcommittee that is basically grilling a lot of like federal scientists and people like the head of the CDC and stuff. And we talked about culture and how culture feeds into science communication. And we talked a little bit about sociology of science, which is the culture of science. I learned that there's actually a whole field called science of science that investigates the science as a discipline and looks at the economics of science and the sociology of science and ways that the social sciences basically inform science. So we have many different pieces of this puzzle, and the puzzle is SciComm. So this week we're going to create our own SciComm. We're not going to do it in this lecture, but after this lecture, you should have all the tools you need to create your own SciComm. And that's like the purpose of this course, is to communicate science. So last time we talked about the role of science policy, science and policy challenges facing the world. We compared the way scientists communicate versus the ways politicians communicate. And we talked about the importance of science communication as a way to bridge the political divide and stop the polarization of science. So today we're talking about create your own SciComm, as I mentioned. So Ayman Arshad, who used to do our social media for Fancy Comma before Twitter got incredibly weird, she used to write tweets for us. She also wrote an article for Fancy Comma. She's a member of the Fancy Comma team called 10. She wrote this article called 10 Forms of SciComm for Everyone. So here are 10 forms of science communication that are in different formats. And so if you've ever been, so I'm a journalist, and I've learned over the years that different messages are more suited for different mediums. And in some ways, I don't know if you've heard the phrase, the medium is the message, but the medium is the message kind of. So like sometimes you want to do a podcast, or sometimes you want to write a journalism article, or sometimes you want to make art, or maybe even something as simple as like an Instagram reel. So let's talk about some of those different forms of science communication and the different ways you can communicate about science. So the first is obviously writing. I've done a lot of science communication writing in my life, not just as a science communicator for the past 10 years, but also in science. And we've all done science writing. It's the most straightforward of the different science communication methods. It's also a bit boring. ChatGPT can help with this now, but only to a certain extent, as it makes up facts. I read this really crazy article, I think in Yahoo, about a girl named Olivia, and she worked as a content writer, and they used when ChatGPT came out, they started replacing her work with ChatGPT. So in emails, they referred to her as Olivia/ChatGPT. So that's kind of like, we can all go to ChatGPT to like write things, but it can do really basic things. I found I was just using it earlier to summarize to like take a phrase and try to make it shorter. And it kind of helped me, but it also makes up facts, it hallucinates. So you have to be really careful with ChatGPT. And remember that sometimes less is more. Be creative and use analogies, metaphors, and similes in your writing to engage the reader. So the next form is talking, and I do a lot of talking. Talking can take many forms. You can give a presentation communicating science, which is actually part of science. I've done that a lot. We all do this a lot. Chatting with friends and family about science, giving a speech, yammering on social media or YouTube. You have to think about what you want to say and how you want to say it. You have to think about your audience. Some questions that I like to ask myself before I give a talk or a speech of some kind is, what is the goal of your communication? Who is your target audience? And how will you know when your target audience has received your message in the way you have wanted and acted accordingly if applicable? So the third is drawing and designing. Obviously, Sci art, I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's short for science art. This obviously requires artistic skills, and I don't really have artistic skills. and that's why I've been using generative AI. Like I used Suno.ai to like write a song about fancy comma, and that was really cool. So, but if you're artistically inclined, drawing and designing might be a great way to communicate science. You can use Canva to make an infographic. I've recently started using Canva, and also, well, we'll get to videos, but I use DaVinci Studio to edit my videos for my YouTube. So this is actually a really valuable skill. Drawing, designing, video editing also, I think we'll get to that later, but these are high demand skills. To some extent, generative AI can do these, but you can also be hired as a freelance graphic artist to do, for example, to come up with journal covers for scientists, to create images for blogs. There's a lot of different, it's a very versatile skill and not one that a lot of people have. Being an effective sci artist involves knowing how to communicate science clearly, visually. All right, so the next one is public engagement, and this is like basically outreach opportunities with young people. There are many opportunities to do this, partnering with local schools as a graduate student, or if you are a neuroscientist, you can do this with Brain Awareness Week. Many organizations ask scientists and engineers to judge as student engineering, business, and science fairs. There are also many mentorship programs for elementary, middle, and high schoolers. If you're a college or graduate student, your institution's public service center may have opportunities available. And this is usually what people talk about when they say broader impacts. That's a phrase specific to like National Science Foundation grants. And I'm pretty sure I've got the graduate fellowship program honorable mention just from broader impacts, but now my whole work is broader impact. So people discount public engagement in science, but it's really important to engage the public, because just think of everything that happened in the pandemic with people's public engagement in science. It's kind of like it's a whole study in itself, and it's a really important one that actually is very high profile right now, happening in the select subcommittee for COVID. So then we have videography. As I mentioned, I edit videos for our YouTube. I use DaVinci Studio. There's a ton of YouTubes online. You can learn how to add text to your videos. You can do the cool effects. Like, I don't know how much you guys watch like YouTube, but there's a lot of really interesting effects you can use on YouTube for YouTube videos to make your videos more interesting and more engaging. I'm going to try to add more cool effects to my YouTube videos. So science communication videos and films, Instagram and TikTok reels count. These days, anyone with a smartphone can produce video content, and we'll talk more about videography when we get to filmmaking. So now we have poetry. Poetry can take many forms and has few structural requirements. I was tutoring a kid in poetry, and they were like, oh, I have to write a poem. How do you write a poem? And it was like really hard to explain to them, like, actually a poem can be anything because it doesn't have any requirements. Like, you could just write like 5 words and call it a poem. You could probably write like 2 words and call it a poem. When I was in high school, I did my honors, my thesis project on E.E. Cummings, who is famous for not capitalizing and for just completely creating kind of like a visual aspect to his poems by like putting words, like having different letters kind of cascade. And there's actually SciComm poetry. Sam Illingworth does a lot of SciComm poetry. He actually wrote a book on this subject, and he runs the SciComm poetry journal, Consilience. So you can check out Consilience at that link, consilience-journal.com. So now we have filmmaking. We kind of already talked about video production. Filmmaking is obviously a kind of visual storytelling. It also has a narrative element that maybe shorter videos don't have, that can range from the simple, such as taking videos on your smartphone, to more complex, such as a more structured video recording setting, and it requires editing skills. You can use free tools such as DaVinci Studio and Canva. I use both of those, and I'm really happy with them because they're free. And especially in the economic times we're in, anything you can do to save money is amazing. So next we have comedy, and comedy is a really great way to connect with people. It's a great way to, life can be very hard sometimes, and comedy can be a great way to kind of make fun of that, laugh at that, maybe not make fun of that. That's kind of a mean thing to say about life, but definitely laughing at life is something that I do. I don't know if you've ever cried until it became hilarious and then started laughing at yourself because you were crying so much. But that's one thing that happened to me in the pandemic. So, stand up comedy can be an engaging way to communicate science. You can think outside of the box, not just talking about scientific facts, but the scientific process, making humorous light of the many downfalls and challenges involved. This can also take the form of short form video content such as Instagram Reels or even a tweet, or X, which is now what Twitter is called, which I'll never get used to that because I will just keep saying tweets. But comedy is a really good one for science communication because scientists, I think science is very serious, but on some level, it's not that serious. We can still laugh at the seriousness, and there's a lot of space to make things that are not funny, even a little bit sad, like my weird crying problem that I had one day in the pandemic, and turn it around and just like laugh at it because that's ridiculous to cry for so long until you realize you're tired of crying. And I think we've all been there. So that was my example. Um, Hopefully you can it's a talent and a gift to find the humorous aspect of situations and find the good in situations, and I think comedy is a huge part of that. Um, so that was number 8. Number 9 is teaching STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Teaching a concept helps you understand it better. You must be able to communicate science well to be able to teach science. And other forms of SciComm outlined here can also be instructional. I'm a substitute teacher as well as a tutor, so I do a lot of teaching. And a lot of times the teaching that you do, it's a lot of creative problem solving, and it really does engage the science mind, even if you don't teach STEM, because I'm an English tutor, so that really has nothing to do with STEM. But I'm also an Algebra 1 tutor, so that is definitely the M in STEM. So let's just finish this and then we can go to the discussion. So hopefully I've given you some ideas on science communication methods you can use. Remember that the medium is the message, so you have to think about the medium and the message together. Like if you're going to do a podcast, you probably don't want to like have a really boring script. You want like an engaging script that's like short and easily accessible, easily comprehensible. So science games. Um, Gamifying stuff is a really great way to make it more interesting and engaging. When I was working with Science Friday to develop a game that it was a escape room, which I've never done an escape room, but my friends, my MIT nerd friends are like masters of escape rooms. So they are like experts in escape rooms, but basically it's like a puzzle. You have to solve the puzzle. And then like when you solve the puzzle, you like, I guess, get out of the escape room. I really still don't know what escape rooms are, but basically we created it with Science Friday. I helped create 5 neuroscience activities that explain to middle schoolers how the brain works. And so that was really fun. It's really fun to get young people interested in neuroscience. And the fun thing about games is like people get really into games, and it's really innovative to do science games, and it's really engaging, so you can maximize learning by gamifying science. And there's a lot of research on that too, not just for science, but just like gamification as it relates to learning, like how much you learn or how easily you can learn stuff. So you can create a brand new science game with your own rules. You can take an existing game and turn it into a science game. For example, in grad school, my colleagues and I created a PhD Careerland game based on the board game Candyland. And I actually presented this game at the Society for Neuroscience conference 10, 11 years ago. So here's the game. It is just Candyland. I don't know if you've ever played Candyland, but we created a board. It's called Careerland because I was in the Society for Neuroscience in Washington. I was the vice president, and I was also on like the career development committee. So my fellow career development committee members and I created this game. And so it's kind of like Candyland. The different spaces I think are different jobs. Like you can work for the FDA. I can't read the rest of these, but like Corning is industry. FDA is obviously government. Kelly is, I'm not sure what Kelly is. I don't know. I can't read these anymore. But the whole point of this game was like, you start out in undergrad, then you go to grad school, then it gets really dicey, and then you're like kind of in career land, or you can go do a postdoc. I guess I don't know what this was, but I can't read that anymore. But there was obviously no science communication career, no science journalism. It was very strictly science, hard skills oriented, because 10 years ago, everyone in my PhD program was going to become an academic researcher or do neuroscience. And looking back, some of us are not doing that. So 10 years is a long time and things can change a lot. So an update of this might have different career options. But at that time, this was very innovative, and it's also just fun. It's good to do fun stuff. And yeah. So, oh, there's actually 11 of these. Oh, yeah, because so the other one is SciComm memes. So then we have memes. Obviously, we all know what memes are in this day and age. So Kirsten Joseph wrote an article for the Fancy Comma blog about how she uses memes, and this is one of the memes she created. This is one of my favorite memes. It has that cat with a salad, and I don't know why the cat is there, but it's like obviously very angry. And then it has the lady that looks like Cameron Diaz and the other lady, and they're like yelling at the cat. Obviously, it's not there. These are two images superimposed. So they're calling the cat an invasive species, and the cat says, we're talking about ants, okay? Because she studies invasive ant species. So it's like a little bit unhinged, but I think it's like, that can be fun. It can be fun to be unhinged, as as the receptionist at my dermatologist's office once said. So let's see what's after this. So that's it. So we made it.